So guys, we just hit the first day of fall, and so I'm having to switch from things I've grown in the garden to grocery store products that I'll have to take a chance on. But there's one thing that I want to tell you, that all produce that comes from the grocery store, even if it says organic, there's some level of pesticides and herbicides in there. It's nearly impossible to grow on a large scale without using some of those. So I'm going to show you 5 different ways to remove 99% or more of pesticides from from the produce that is coming from the grocery store. So in my garden, I try to do everything organically. 99% of the time, I'm not using any type of harsh pesticide. If I am using it, it's usually around the perimeter of the garden just to stop things from getting inside. But on the vegetables themselves, it's all organic. So let's get started, and I'm going to show you 5 different ways where you can remove pesticides that were used on your grocery store produce. Now, the first recipe is super simple. Almost everyone has baking soda somewhere in their house, sodium bicarbonate. And what you're going to do for just standard vegetables, if you just think they have a light amount of pesticides, if they're not imported from a foreign country, you're going to use 3 tablespoons of baking soda per gallon of water. That's for more firmer things. I'll say that you have some things that have thinner skin, so just remember that if it's a little bit on the firm side, like an apple, a pear, or something like that, you can use up to 4, but you just have to remember that you want to try to do this gently to remove the outer waxes or anything else that's on there. It's going to loosen it up, and any possible dirts that didn't get washed away in the manufacturing or the production line. So just remember 3 tablespoons or 4 if you're trying to remove something like a waxy apple buildup. And another thing you want to remember is you want to make sure that you rinse afterwards for about 30 seconds under cold water in your sink. Now, the next way you can remove the pesticides, herbicides, or anything that's been sprayed on your fruits and vegetables is by using food grade hydrogen peroxide. And anything that's not normally that you would find at your local store, I'll put a link in the description, because food grade is a little bit harder to find, so sometimes you won't see that at your local drugstore. So look in the description below and I'll put a link to it, and it's not that expensive. It's maybe slightly more expensive than the standard hydrogen peroxide, but depending on where your food or your produce is labeled from, if it's grown in the USA or a country that has more strict standards for spraying fruits and vegetables, then you could use 8 tablespoons to a gallon. If it's coming from a country where you don't think they have the stringent policies in place not to use harmful pesticides, double that and make it 16 tablespoons or a full cup per gallon of hydrogen peroxide. Make sure you rinse it afterwards, and this will not change the taste, but it will remove a lot of the pesticides from the surface area of the vegetables. So guys, I actually spent the better part of today making a complete produce wash handbook, and it's a multiple page guide on every type of produce, every type of vegetable, berry, any type of green leafy fruit, anything that's in your local grocery store produce section, how to treat it, what's the best of the 5 methods, I think, and also notes on each one. So if you'll look in the description down below, I've got a Patreon link. You can go over there. If you're already a member, you can download it for free, and it's really a handy guide that you can just keep around your kitchen sink, that when you bring some vegetables in, if it's something you normally don't purchase, you can just take a quick glance at it and see what I think is the best way to remove those pesticides and herbicides from it. So guys, the next method is using just ordinary kitchen vinegar, either 3 or 5%, something like that. You're going to use 1 cup to 1 gallon of water, and just go through the guide and you'll see exactly how to use it based on what you've got in your kitchen. But simply put, you're just going to put per gallon that 1 cup on a standard wash, and then if it's imported from another country, you're kind of suspicious about what type of herbicides, pesticides they use, then I would double that as far as the vinegar goes. So anyways, it's 1 cup for standard, 2 cups for heavy per gallon of water. Now next is a salt water wash, and so I would say about 4 tablespoons per gallon on a standard safe produce, which is imported from a country that has a little bit more stricter standards. And then those suspect countries where you think that there could be a lot of really toxic pesticides used, double that up to 8 tablespoons per gallon of water, and let it do a soak. Rinse thoroughly at least twice to remove any salt residue, so you won't have a salty taste to your vegetables. Now next is using citric acid powder, and it will not change the flavor of your vegetables, so you don't have to worry about that, but you do want to do a thorough 30 to 60 second wash after you do any of these methods. So just make sure you do that each time. Also, another thing I may have not mentioned is you don't want to mix your hydrogen peroxide with your vinegar, because there can be a reaction there. So make sure you do a rinse in between each one, and make sure you rinse it out the container if you're not using your sink, or if you are, just make sure you remove all the hydrogen peroxide or the vinegar if you're doing a back-to-back wash with two different products. But anyways, the citric acid per gallon is 4 tablespoons or 6 tablespoons of the heavy. So just make sure that you follow that guideline and make sure you rinse afterwards. So one of the things that really shocked me about organic, because I thought organic meant it was absolutely no pesticides, no herbicides. Well, it appears that that's not completely true. There can be a percentage still used. So you might be getting 90% just standard fruit, vegetable, whatever you're ordering, and then 10% of it was pure organic. So you may want to read the label very carefully about what organic actually is. So it's not as pure as you think. So this is really important. These 5 steps or these 5 methods you can use. You can use them back to back. If you want to use one method, rinse, and then use the next method, you can be assured of removing nearly 100% of pesticides. Removing the skin from a lot of things will remove pesticides as well. So don't eat the skin on anything, especially apples or anything else. We think, unless we're growing them ourselves, we think that once we wash it and go through this process that we removed it all, but it could be slightly systemic, so it may have gotten further into the skin, not just on the surface. Now, one trick you can use is if it's something delicate like mushrooms or sprouts, putting it and soaking it in water is probably not going to help. It's not going to be a good result from that. So you can take something like your watering can, fill it with a mixture, and just pour the water over it, where if it's a delicate thing like a mushroom or sprouts, it's going to work a lot better than soaking. So guys, I really appreciate you watching, and if you have any questions about this video or any previous video, I hope you'll become a public subscriber first, because I tend to put those questions to the very front of the line. I get anywhere from 100 to 300 questions and comments a day, and it's nearly impossible to answer everybody. Also, if you want a copy of this guide, it's very detailed with a lot of different types of produce. So go to the Patreon link in the description, and if you become a member, you can get it for absolutely free, or you can purchase it for just $1. So either way, you'll get a lot of information, and it took me several hours to put it together. So I think it'll really help you in making sure your produce is safe as possible before you eat it. So guys, I really appreciate you watching, and have a great day.